Are you struggling to get started with watercolor art? You try to recreate watercolor tutorials and you just can't seem to recreate what seems to come so easy to other artists? Same. Watercolor, both on paper and in Procreate, used to really intimidate me. In fact, some of my early YouTube videos were of watercolor projects that I wasn't even really that confident about. They're really not great. I mean, they're still up on my YouTube, but like, I really don't recommend looking at them. Just don't look. But then I changed one thing. I stopped holding myself to such a high standard. Instead of trying to impress with my amazing watercolor skills, I just gave myself permission to have fun. And that really did change everything. I just started making fun, simple, not fancy projects. And that's what I want to share with you today. Easy watercolor ideas for Procreate that are fun, low pressure, and surprisingly satisfying to make. And using Procreate is such a great way to practice watercolor without the mess, the pressure, or wasting expensive watercolor paper, to loosen up, experiment, and actually enjoy the process. So we're going to get started with our first project, and that is just making the watercolor brush that we'll use to make all of the paintings in our video. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So let's start by creating a simple watercolor brush. I thought a great way to get started on our projects here today would be making our own brush. Believe it or not, I have 2 watercolor brush sets for sale in my Etsy shop. For me, making the brushes has come much easier than the actual projects. I love making brushes, so let me show you how. And I will link my watercolor brush sets for Procreate in the description if you would like a complete collection of brushes. So here I am in Procreate, and I'm just going to go to my brush library. I've already created a folder here. It's just called 5-minute watercolor projects, and it's just a folder I've made for our projects today. There's already a brush in here that I made for these projects. It's called Coffee Spill. It emulates what a coffee spill or a water spill would look like, and I'm going to give this brush for free. It's linked in the description box down below. If you follow the link, it will take you where you can download this absolutely for free. But now let's go ahead and make our other brush for our projects today. So I'm going to tap the plus sign here, and now we're just going to code our brush for our projects. The first thing we're going to do is tap on shape, and from there we're going to tap on edit here. Procreate comes standard with an entire library of images that you can use to make brushes. So we will tap on import and then source library. Source library is awesome. I love this. So the one I want to choose is mess. If you want to make other brushes after you make this one, just choosing one of these shape sources that doesn't have clear edges, like these wouldn't work very well for a watercolor brush. You want something that would emulate a paintbrush, and I want to choose the one called mess. And then I will just tap on done. And now we're going to change a few more of the codes here in our brush. And still under shape, the first one I want to change is under shape properties, and I want to change scatter to max. And then I'm going to change the count to 7. So that's just the number of times it's duplicated. That image is duplicated on top of each other. Next, we're going to grain, and we'll tap on edit again and choose a grain source from the source library. So we'll tap on import again in source library. The one I want to choose is bad spray. I use bad spray a lot for my brushes. It just works really well. So then I'll tap on done. And for grain behavior, I'm going to keep it to moving, and I'm not going to change any of these other settings under grain. But then we'll go to rendering, and we want to change the rendering mode to uniform blending. Now we'll go to wet mix. Wet mix is the settings that will allow you to replicate water moving with paint. So this is a very important step here. So I will first change dilution. I want that up to 50%. Charge is how much is placed when you first set down your Apple Pencil, like that right there. And I kind of want to turn that off. So I'm going to turn that one all the way down to 0 or disabled, because I kind of like it when you don't have so much right at first, but that's just a personal preference. You can adjust charge however you like. And pull, I'm going to set it down to 35%, and grade, I'm going to go all the way up to smooth. The last setting I want to change is under properties, and I just want to change the max size to 500%. And now we can just give this a name by going to about this brush, and we can call this watercolor brush. You don't have to get too fancy with the name, or you can come up with a super cool name. It's totally up to you. And then if you want to sell or share this brush, I just suggest adding your name and a picture. You can even sign it if you want, and then you can tap on done. And done. So here's our watercolor brush I created, and now we're going to test it out. I'm going to go to my color palettes. I'm just using this color palette. It's called 5-Minute Watercolor Projects, and I've also linked this one down below for you to use for free. And I'm just gonna pick up one of these colors and test out my brush. And that works pretty much how watercolor works. It blends in together, and it is pressure sensitive. So using your Apple Pencil at different pressures is going to emulate how a real watercolor brush would behave. But you know, never ending color, because you don't have to keep picking up colors with your paintbrush or pick up water with your paintbrush, but it's as close as you can get digitally, I think. And for our other projects, I wanted to make a second watercolor brush. So all I'm gonna do is I'm going to duplicate the one that we just created and change a couple of the settings. And the first setting I want to change is under the shape, and we'll tap on edit, and we will go back to the source library and choose a different shape. And for this one, I want to change it to flat brush. It still has a lot of uneven edges, but I kind of want something that's not round so I can have a different kind of look with the brush. And for this one, I'm going to raise the count up to 13. I think that looks good. And the next setting I want to change is under Apple Pencil. I want to change the pressure size to max, and then properties, I am going to turn this one down a little bit. I don't need the maximum size to be quite as big, so I'm just going to set this back down to 100, and I kind of like that's a little bit smaller. And then I'm just going to change this to watercolor brush 2, since it's a second watercolor brush, and I'll just press done. And now we have our second brush, and you can see that it's very different, and it's just a little bit more precise in case we want to have a little bit more of a precise brush. So now both of our watercolor brushes are done, and you can kind of see how they act right there. This one has more of a jagged edge, and this one has more of a smooth edge. So we'll have a different effect for these two brushes that we just made together. So for these projects, I'm going to be using a canvas that is 1080 pixels by 1350 pixels. In the first one, we're going to do a watercolor treescape. So we'll have a night sky and some silhouetted trees, and it's going to be really pretty. So let's go ahead and do that. First, I'm going to choose my color, and I'm just going to choose this second dark blue here, and then I will choose the first watercolor brush. I'm going to turn it up because the first thing I'm going to do is we're going to set down our sky. We just kind of want to get kind of blobby and free and just kind of not get too precise. Just put down some blobbiness if that's, you know, artful blobs. I think I need to get a shirt called Artful Blobs because I say artful blobs all the time. It's just one of my favorite art terms that isn't really an art term. So here's the start of our sky, and then we can just switch to kind of like a purple. I think a purple would be pretty. Just try and add a little bit of variation to our sky with the different colors. So that's perfectly fine right there. We're gonna have our silhouetted trees down here at the bottom. The sky doesn't really have to be too precise. It's just, it is what it is. And now I'm gonna add a new layer, and I wanna get started on my trees. And so I'm gonna start on the far layer of my tree. So there's gonna be 2 layers of trees. So one's in the background and one's in the foreground. And we can imagine that the ones in the background might be a little bit lighter because they might have a little bit more illumination from the moon. So I have 2 dark colors here. I have an almost black and I have a black. I'm going to use the almost black, and then I'm going to switch to my watercolor brush 2 for this part because I want that more precise brush. So now I'm just going to lay down some trees in the background. And from our point of view, we're kind of at the tree line. We're looking up at the sky. So the ones that are in the background are going to be shorter than the ones in the foreground because the trees that are closer to us will be taller. So I'll show you what I mean by that. For our first tree, all you need to do is just make a line, and you can put as many layers of the watercolor down as you like. And then we can lower the size of the brush and just create the tree branches, kind of like a pine tree. These are going to be pine trees. So that is my first background tree. I'm going to add a few more of those, and then I'll show you how to place the foreground trees. So So there are our background trees, and now we can place our foreground trees, and we will use this true black for these trees. And so it's much the same, but we are changing the size of them because they are presumably closer to us. So these are going to start here. There we go. And I added one little one because I had a little bit of an empty spot right there. So I wanted to add one extra one. And you can kind of feel like you've got the tallest trees looming above you, looking up at the night sky. It's kind of like a twilighty time of day. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to erase away part of the sky so that we just see the white behind it. And that's going to be representative of our moon. And then we'll add a couple stars. So I'll go to my eraser and I'm just going to choose the watercolor brush 2 because I want that smooth edge. And then select my sky layer and then just erase away some of the sky, and there we have our moon. Now let's go ahead and add some stars. I'm just going to turn the brush down to a very small, let's try 3%, and then just start adding some stars. And this again is just the eraser. I'm not using white. And there's our first 5-minute watercolor. It was super easy and really fun. It gives you an idea of how you can make watercolor fun and low pressure and just enjoyable to make. So this next project, it's gonna be another sky illustration, but we're gonna add a few more fun techniques to this. So the first thing I want to do is go to my lasso tool and tap on rectangle, and we don't want a fill, but we just want to create a space within our canvas and create an edge or a border to it, just sort of so it kind of feels a little more like a real watercolor painting. Now I'm going to choose that first watercolor brush that I created, and I'm just going to have fun with my different colors here to create another kind of sky. We can even just like consider this a space sky, so it can be as dark or as light as you want. Just have fun making a splotchy, pretty sky. What I'm doing is I'm adding a new layer for each layer of paint that I'm adding. I don't want the watercolor brush to pull from the other colors I've laid down. I want to layer them on, so I am making use of those layers for this one. So I've got several layers of watercolor laid down. So now I am just going to let go of my lasso tool, and then I'm just going to pinch all of these together. So now it's one layer. And this again is just going to utilize that concept of erasing away. That is very much like real life watercolor. You typically don't lay down white unless you're adding like an acrylic or some type of pencil to a watercolor painting. So what you usually do is you mask something so that the white of your image is just the white of the paper. And so we're kind of replicating that, but doing a little bit backwards. We didn't mask anything except for our border here, but we're just gonna erase it away because we can do that because it's Procreate. So now I'm just going to make some shooting stars, and it's gonna be really pretty. So there's another really fun and easy one to do, and you can be as splotchy with the night sky as you want. You can add as many stars as you want, add a couple of twinkling little stars, and you got another really great watercolor painting. This next project is replicating coffee spill art. I've wanted to try this for a while, and this is a great opportunity to do that. And I've made this coffee spill brush right here. I mentioned before that this one is linked below for you to have for free, and I'm gonna show you what I do with it. So all you do is you set up the brush as big as you want and just start spilling your coffee. And that looks like a pretty good coffee spill to me. So this again, you can do whatever you want in this coffee spill. I just wanna do another fun erase away effect. So I'm gonna choose the first watercolor brush, and I'm going to use that one because of its jagged edge, and I'm just going to make a kind of cute little coffee cup inside the coffee spill. Like that doesn't even take 5 minutes, and it creates such a cute little watercolor. I love this one, probably because I'm obsessed with coffee. It kind of looks like your coffee spill went on top of like a coffee mug stencil, and you just kind of pulled the stencil away and that was what was left. I think it really does a great job of replicating that look. And I'm gonna be honest with you, like I made this brush that I'm sharing with you, the coffee spill brush, and I still just used everything from the source library to make that brush. So making watercolor projects in Procreate is so fun, especially when you make every single thing by yourself. You make the brushes yourself, the color palette yourself, although I am sharing mine with you today just to get you started, but you can do it, I promise. So this last project we're gonna make is watercolor feathers, and we're gonna use the lasso tool or the selector tool again. I love making shapes with the selector tool and adding color inside the shape that the selector tool has created. So the first thing we're gonna do is we're gonna choose the selector tool and go to freehand. We're not gonna use the color fill because we're gonna add the color to it with our watercolor brushes. So I'll show you what I mean. So the first thing we wanna do is make a shape of a feather with our selector tool. That's a very basic shape of a feather, and now I want to choose a couple different colors from my color palette. I'm going to choose this green first because I haven't used the green yet, and then I want to use the coffee spill, and you can use whatever combination of these brushes that you like, but I want to start off with a coffee spill because it's a lot more graphic. And now I'll just keep layering colors. So you can add as much or as little color as you like, and then once you're satisfied with how your color spill looks in your feather shape, you can just deselect the lasso tool, and now we can add a few more details to our feather. So again, we're going to go to the eraser and have it go down just whichever one that you have chosen. I have the watercolor brush chosen, it doesn't matter which one. I have the first watercolor brush chosen, and you're just gonna create that center line to the feather, and that just looks like that center spine that's in the middle of a feather. And it doesn't have to be precise, it doesn't have to go all the way to the end or all the way down to that little quill part at the bottom. But now we're gonna switch to the second watercolor brush that we chose, and we're gonna add a few of the little wispy feathers to the bottom of our feather, and just kind of that same kind of motion that I used to make my trees at the outset, and just kind of add those little wispy feathery bits. And there is a fun watercolor feather. You can make a bunch of these if you want, and this would look really cool as kind of a print that you can frame for decoration in your home. You can be wild with the colors, or you can choose a specific color theme so that it matches any motifs in your home, and it's a really cool bohemian kind of art piece that you can make. Watercolor doesn't have to be intimidating, especially when you're giving yourself the freedom to play with it. I hope these ideas help you feel more confident and more creative. And if the idea of making art just for fun resonates you will love this next video. It's called How to Make Art Fun Again. It's all about letting go of the pressure and just falling back in love with making art again. So click on the video link here and I will see you there.